Boom. Okay, recording has started. And this is the May 29th, 2025 Crossplane community meeting. Let me go ahead and, as always, drop a link into the Zoom chat here for the agenda doc if folks aren't already in there. Feel free to jump on in and add any topics that you want to. We definitely have time to discuss or explore some things together. If anybody wants to talk about anything that's on their mind, add yourself as an attendee as well. Everyone's welcome to do so. So let's jump into it then. We met a month ago, 4 weeks ago, as usual with this cadence. And since then, the most important thing that's gone on has been the 1.20 release. And we did a couple patch releases along with that were mostly just backports of security fixes, so nothing major to talk about there. But I did want to go over the 1.20 release and kind of look at the release notes here, because there were some interesting things or things of note that I wanted to share with this group and share for the folks that may watch the recording later on. So 1.20 release had a whole bunch of stuff in it, basically, and there are some important things to note. So let's go over them right now. So in terms of like warnings and notable changes here, the first thing is that the package manager, has a concept of a default registry. If you don't provide a registry, like a fully qualified package source here, if you don't provide the registry, then Crossplane will make an assumption about it and default it to the xpackage.crossplane.io registry. That is the vendor neutral, CNCF owned package registry there that the Crossplane project and ecosystem uses. And so that is a change from the prior default of xpackage.upbound.io. This is part of our graduation feedback and making sure that the project is run in a vendor neutral and sustainable way. So we did have to make this change as part of continuing to mature the project and graduation. So this is changing the default here. We've been through this before, so we do kind of understand we understand that it's fairly low risk for a couple of reasons. One, it's well tested because we've done it before. Two is that there is an option that if you're using a default registry and you want to continue using the same assumptions you've done before and not make any updates, then you could tell the Crossplane upgrade to the Helm chart to don't change registries, keep it as it was. That's perfectly reasonable. And then the third thing is that I don't think many people are using a default registry anymore. I think most people in the community are using fully qualified package names. And it would somewhat surprise me to hear if there was any sort of, large percentage of folks using, not specifying an explicit registry. So if you are if you're taking advantage or using the default and not explicitly specifying a full qualified registry, let me know, because I want to hear more about that use case. But I don't think many people are doing this. So that's one thing to note. Second thing to note is that real-time compositions are now, we matured those to beta and they're on by default. So this is definitely something you want to have some awareness of, is that when you upgrade to 1.20, real-time compositions are on, and they use watches to run a composition execution. When any of the compose resources change, the XR changes, any of that stuff changes, it will basically run the composition pipeline. That works pretty darn well now, and I'm quite happy with where we got that to. But there is definitely a case to take note of here, and it's right here that I'm highlighting. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So in the case that a provider has a bug, and it's not able to converge on a stable spec for a managed resource that it's managing, and then you end up in a situation where a provider and the composite resource are fighting over a value. Then having these watches that responds to changes and doesn't wait on pull intervals and stuff, having it respond quickly and run composition in real time, basically, it can make this situation worse because it could get in a tight loop. There's been some work to start to investigate deep down into that. We don't have a full solution for this yet, but basically this is a case to take note of. If it happens when there's a bug in the provider, essentially, so it's not a mainline scenario, and I think that we want to do more to handle this in the long run, but if this kind of thing happens, we should be fixing the bugs of the providers as well. So this is definitely something to take note of. And if you want to opt out of real-time compositions, then you can do that as well when you upgrade. Just make sure you set enable real-time compositions flag to false, and then you can move along with that. I think the last one that I'll go through here for the release notes that is important for everybody to take note of is that there is a couple of flags that have changed names in this release. Ones that are beta maturity or higher, they're all backwards compatible. Like we changed the name for it, but we made an alias for it basically. So if you're still using the same old flag name, that's fine. You can do that and it still works. No problems with that. But if you were opted into the alpha feature of automatic dependencies, automatic dependency management, not in the upgrade scenario, but in the downgrade scenario. If you ask Crossplane to potentially, if it realizes it needs to, download a package version, that flag name has changed. And as an alpha feature, we're just making that breaking change essentially. I don't think many people will be affected by this, but it's certainly something to take note of. And I won't go through the highlights of this, but we had a bunch of awesome features. And so people can read through those on their own time, but lots of really cool stuff went into 1.20. And then I really wanted to thank as well, both Carl and Toby for the efforts they put into the 1.20 release. Those are our two release MVPs. Normally we just pick one, but it was too hard to pick one this time. I was really happy with the effort that Carl was putting into validating the 1.20 build and found the showstopper bug, basically. That help us get the quality up there on real-time compositions. And then Toby doing some feature work as well. So thank you to both of you all for the efforts that you all put into 1.20 and congratulations on being a release MVP. That was a whirlwind tour of 1.20. Any other comments or things to add for 1.20 from folks? All right. Keep on moving on then. So the next big piece of news to talk through and get excited about as well is that now we've finished 1.20, that's shipped. And so the next release here is going to be the V2 of Crossplane. So as of today, we've taken the V2 branch and we've gone ahead and merged it into main. So the next time we cut a release, it will have the V2 functionality in it. So we've talked about that a little bit here, but let's about what is in V2. So I think folks on this call will be fairly well informed on that. But let's talk through what that means for next steps, basically. So that basically means development work now is going on the V2 branch there. I don't see major features going, being backported to the V1 release versions. Obviously, we support the latest 3 versions of Crossplane, so patch releases, security fixes, all that bug fixes and stuff like that we'll certainly do, but major feature work will be going towards V2 right now. And that means that the next release, there will not be a V1.21 or 1.21 release. The next release will be V2, basically. What we have noticed here is that the reception and the feedback on the V2 direction has been very, very positive. People are pretty excited about it, it seems, from all the folks we're talking to. So now is a good time early in the release milestone that we're in right now. Now is the time to go ahead and merge it and start baking it, start converging on it, getting it to a high quality release so that we're able to release V2 at when this milestone is over. It's the right time to do it. We do note that the design proposal has not yet been fully merged. We've gone through a bunch of the feedback on there. I think we're converging on a lot of those things. But when Nick gets back from his time off this week, he will, over the next 1 to 2 weeks, will revisit the design proposal and try to close out everything and get it down to ratified, approved, merged, and done. And so that sets us up here for doing the V2 release with the next milestone of Crossplane, which, as we do quarterly releases. So sometime in the early August timeframe would be the next release train for Crossplane, and that will be V2. So there's a bunch of stuff going on here, or we have a V2 specific board. And so there's a bunch of loose ends. There's a bunch of things from the design proposal that folks want to see implemented. Some provider work is tracked here. So this is basically like the board that's tracking all the things we probably want to include for V2. So that also means that there's opportunities here. There's plenty of work going on. So feel free to reach out if folks are interested in any of that stuff. And we could talk through, what's really important for people, like how do we make this really successful? Because this is going to be it's from some semantic version speaking, this is going to be a major release of Crossplane, right? It is V2, that is the next major milestone. And just, from everything that's going into it is a really major release. So we want to make it successful, and feel free to reach out about any concerns or anything going on with that. So I have some cleanup to do then, because we still have a V1.21 roadmap and some of those V1.21 features that needs to be converged with the V2 effort here, since V2 is just got to be essentially replace 1.21. We'll talk in a second through some of the features we're going to be focusing on, but let me pause for a sec. And with V2, design, the proposal, preview, the merging into main, all that sort of stuff. Does anybody have anything they want to add about V2 or concerns or questions or anything like that? Okay, cool. Then let's talk then about what will be in this release. There will be plenty of effort going into this for sure. So everything we talked about with the V2 preview, all the major marquee features and changes of Crossplane in V2, of having namespaced composition and composite resources, namespace managed resources, being able to compose arbitrary resources, all that stuff. That seems to resonate. That's going to stick. That's part of what we expect to ship. And then all the feedback and polishing and hardening that we talked about on the project board we already looked at. And then in addition to that, we want to spend some time on a couple of other feature areas that I think are quite interesting. And I think, Scott, you're on the call here, so I'm going to ask you to talk about something real quick, buddy, so be prepared. But there's some effort that we want to put further into high-level metrics. We talked about that in the last milestone, and it didn't quite land. We didn't get to put that effort into it that we wanted to, so we still want to do that as part of this milestone, and give a little bit more insight into not just like the Crossplane runtime and managed resources, but at the more of the composition level as well. Scott has already started working on providing some more insight into the reconciliation operations that Crossplane's doing and the progress it's making. So, in the form of observed generation. So Scott, if you're on, my friend, can you just talk real quick about where you're at with that and kind of how that, not necessarily how it works, but what that brings us in terms of a feature?
Yeah, sure. So in the world of CRDs and best practices, and in with managed fields, the practice is that observed generation is inside of a root condition, and this root condition, it dictates the level of up-to-dateness of the resource you're trying to observe. What this means in practice is what an observer can say about the resource is that the reconciler has at least seen the change to the spec that caused the generation bump and is doing something. So it doesn't mean that it's ready, or it doesn't mean that it's finished, or it just means that the reconciler has done one reconciliation loop with the new generation. Generation gets bumped anytime anything in the spec gets changed. So it's really important for an observer or a controller of another resource to say, I would like to update you. And then if the system's in a lot of load, or the work queues are backed up, you get this race condition where you change the spec and then you look at the status. And if you have no observed generation, you don't know if the work happened or not, or if the controller is alive or not. And so observed generation in concert with a root condition helps understand what's the real state of this thing. And I actually made an issue to try to reclaim the ready condition for resources that are coming from providers. It's an API breaking change, but we need to have a root condition for providers too, and ready can't be owned by the providers. So I can find that issue. I would like more commentary from the community. And then this kind of dovetails into solution for K status a little bit, if I want to jump ahead in the queue.
Yeah, Scott, I was going to want you to talk about that as well too, with the context of hey, we haven't necessarily this isn't a statement of, hey, case status, and exactly what case status is what Crossplane is going to adopt, but like having sort of an answer for this problem area is what we're trying to figure out. So continue on with that, Scott, and all of your
Great.
wisdom.
So in my religion, there are two possible root conditions in Kubernetes custom resources. And I think that core types didn't do this. And I think if core types were rewritten, they would do this. But the two root conditions in an object, meaning you have conditions and you have subconditions, and subconditions represent major work that a reconciliation process is doing, and the root condition aggregates the most important pieces of information from the subconditions into a single place that non-implementation understanding observers can look at and understand the overall state of that resource. And those two things are ready or succeeded, and that's it. So if you want to get and so like where does this come from? I spent a bunch of time in Knative. We developed this in Knative and then spread it around the communities. So Tecton does this, Carpenter does this. There's a few other projects around that, like Kada does this. So if we could converge on, and Crossplane does this, we can start observing resources that are living conditions, meaning that they have a ready condition and they operate forever until they get bricked, or job-like resources that run to completion, that those have a succeeded top root level condition. So the stance on case status, I don't believe that negative conditions is a good pattern, because it doesn't let you understand if the reconciler is running and healthy. And I think that the case status opinion was created before managed conditions were created. And that was before observed generation got bumped into the condition and not the root level status field. So personally, I don't think that case status is the answer. In the opinion that they have around disappearing status, and the thing only is true if it's broken. So, but that doesn't mean that we can't be compatible with their backup solution with looking for ready or succeeded, which they also do. So that's kind of like how we get to participate in that ecosystem without adopting their kind of strict ideas around how conditions work.
Yeah, Scott, I think that's super informative, and I really appreciate your kind of background, on in this space, that kind of will help us, I think, kind of drive towards a solid solution. Like that's going to be really helpful. And then, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the meta point here is that what we're really trying to do is just we're trying to give hints at what the reconciliation process is doing for the controller, and we're trying to understand when it's appropriate to act on a child's updates. So if a child's status gets changed, the observer gets the change notification inside of Kubernetes. But you might not want to act on it until the generation or the observed generation matches its generation, which trims down on a lot of events that we have to process. Because if the child spec got updated, that's great, but we don't necessarily have to do anything until it actually takes an action. So that's what the result of this work is doing, is that it funnels the actions up into known states and communication between the reconcilers through the objects around when it's actually meaningful to do work and when it's just busy work.
Yep, and it helps external systems understand what the heck Crossplane is doing. It helps people have better insight into what Crossplane is doing, or if it's, they made a change and has it seen it yet? Is it working on it? Like better understanding for everybody, like what the internal reconciliations of all these various controllers are doing is going to be an improvement for everybody. So I think this is really, really good to invest in. And then thank you, Scott. And then the last thing here that we're focusing on, or last high level thing in the V2 timeframe here over the next couple of months, is for function revisions as well. Folks are pretty aware, I think, that unlike composition revisions, where you can have multiple compositions and exist in the same control plane, and then each composition or composite resource can independently pick which composition version it wants to use. You can't say the same thing for functions. You have one version of the function running in a control plane, and that is all you get. So Adam is working on implementing, I think the design has already been approved, maybe, but implementing basically the ability to have multiple revisions of a single function running in the control plane, and then composite resources compositions can pick which version of it that they want. This is really nice for safely rolling out updates and new versions of functions across the control plane of, you have one composition update to use the new version instead of all of them at once getting updated. So it's very nice to be able to roll it out slowly that way in a more safe fashion. This milestone is going to be huge. I'm like looking at this work here, seeing all the things we're investing in, all the things we're working on, and like we're shipping a V2 period. This is going to be massive. So great work, everybody, preemptively, because it's going to be pretty gnarly. But I think when we get this out, it's going to be a really cool step forward for the project, for the community, the ecosystem. So there's a lot to execute on, and I'm really excited to get to make this all happen. We're going to do it together. So thanks everybody on that. Anything else about core, Crossplane runtime before we move on to providers and other stuff? Okay, cool. So as usual, we have a couple links here for various recent releases of functions and providers. You can click through those on your own time. We have some content as well for various mentions, blog posts, videos, etc. about Crossplane. The one definitely worth calling out is Victor's video about V2, and we talk about V2 all the time here because it's super exciting. But if you want to see Victor explain it, which he does a great job explaining stuff and has quite an awesome person to listen to, click on that, watch that, and get up to date quickly on V2 stuff as well. Okay, so other topics to get through here. So quick update about our graduation effort. We've been going through this for about a year now, right? We do have a nice update here that the due diligence for Crossplane's graduation that we were doing with the technical oversight committee, we were given some feedback about how to make the project more sustainable, how to improve vendor neutrality through it, all that sort of stuff. We implemented a whole bunch of changes to make that better about 3 months ago. And then so the technical oversight committee wanted us to keep those changes in place for at least 3 months, and then we can re-engage now and figure out next steps for getting the graduation effort going again. So those 3 months are up. I am really happy personally with the changes that we made within the project and the ecosystem. And so, I'm excited to re-engage and get this effort going again. There's a couple other things that I wanted to just mention that I hope will have no impact, but they're infrastructure migrations, so they could have impact. And so I want people to basically be aware of them and keep your eyes open. So another part of vendor neutrality here is making sure that all the resources and infrastructure that the Crossplane project uses, they are all owned and managed by a neutral authority, such as the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So the Crossplane.io website, we have already completed the migration of that to the CNCF's owned account. So, it's owned by the CNCF. They have full control over it. That's a very good thing for sustainability of the project. Basically, if you see any funny things on the Crossplane.io website, which somebody just noticed 10 minutes before this meeting, let me know, because we had to do a bit of a migration to get into Netlify there, and a bit of funny stuff, and I did it, and I'm not a front-end person, so there's probably some bugs left in that. So if anybody sees anything weird on Crossplane.io, just let me know. And then the other one is that CNCF provides infrastructure in Oracle Cloud as well. And so all of our, the releases, .crossplane.io, where all the binaries get posted to, the charts bucket, where all the Helm charts go, all those got to move too. So those are going to the CNCF owned Oracle object storage stuff account. And Oracle Cloud is interesting. It's a little tricky. I'm picking my words carefully. It's been a little tricky getting that set up correctly. So that will definitely be one to have for everybody here to have an eye on. is, when we do our next release, if, the ability to download and install the Crossplane CLI or the ability to install the Crossplane Helm chart, is it working like it used to? We got to fix that. So please keep eyes and ears open for any of this, any like impacted stuff from this. We don't want any at all, but it's certainly possible as a risk here that we're taking. And just let me know, please. Right. And if anybody is good with Oracle Cloud, reach out to me. I got questions about their model there, and I would like some help. That'd be great. So if you're an Oracle person, let me know. All right. Let's keep rolling. Let's keep rolling. So just a quick update about all the community extension projects. So this is basically everything in Crossplane Contrib organization, all the providers, all the functions there. As part of the graduation effort I was talking about earlier, we need those to be healthy. We have strict policies in place now so that they are actively maintained, that they're publishing releases to a neutral place, all that sort of stuff. We have started taking action to archive some of the projects that are out of compliance there. And so something that folks in this call here can certainly do is, if there are any providers or functions that are important to you that are at risk of being archived or have already been archived, and you want to step up to be a maintainer on them, there are opportunities to do so. I don't want to just archive willy-nilly, projects that don't have maintainers. We need to, but if somebody wants to step up, I'm more than happy to enable you and help you be successful there. So reach out if you want to maintain any of the providers or functions that are basically unmaintained right now. And then if you are already a maintainer, we have some helpful discussion and resources and instructions, et cetera, of how to get your extension or your project in the Crossplane Contrib organization to a healthy and compliant state. So make sure you read this and take action, please, because if we don't see action on some of those, then we'll continue archiving them. And I want to help people be successful here. All right, two more, and then we'll get to the items that John added here. So just a note here that in Crossplane runtime, a couple of releases back, we had removed some functionality that we thought was not in use by anybody. It turned out it was in use, and it caused problems for removing it. So first off, apology for removing that from Crossplane runtime, but making sure that folks know that all the reference functions basically get pointers to various types, then they're used in the EPJET providers, definitely. That is restored to Crossplane runtime. It's available again, and you'll be able to, if you haven't updated in a while, you'll basically be okay because you didn't have to go through that pain. But other folks that did go through that pain, we heard that was a problem. We restored that, and we should be able to be in a good place with this now. And final note is that there's some cool end-to-end test framework stuff that the Deutsche Bahn team put together. They shared it on the main Crossplane Slack. There's some repositories here to take a look at those about helpful functions and frameworks and such to make it easier to write end-to-end tests for Crossplane related stuff and Kubernetes stuff in general too. And then Daniel is scheduled to do a demo next community meeting here. It is a holiday through a lot of countries in Europe today, so he's not able to make it today. But next community meeting in June, I think it's June 26th. Daniel should be here to give a demo and kind of talk through some of that stuff. So you don't want to miss that. That should be pretty darn interesting, I think.
All right.
Yes.
There's a question from Christian on the community projects.
Okay. Yeah. Let's click on that. Yes. Thanks, Christian, for bringing that up. Yeah. So if this issue is still open, can I assume that provider is at risk? Let me click on that and just look at it real quick. Yes, Christian, you can definitely assume that that's at risk.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right. I might be interested in actually stepping up for this one, but I'll actually get back to you on this maybe.
Amazing. Yeah. Feel free to reach out directly, Christian, and help, and we can talk through that together. There were about 100 or so of these projects in the Crossplane Contrib organization, and so I'm kind of slowly going through them and following up and trying to chase down the maintainer team basically. So a little bit of cat herding here, and yeah. So if there hasn't been anything, then yeah, that means it's at risk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all hope is lost. People are busy throughout the whole ecosystem, and maybe they just haven't responded yet. But cats will be herded, and even if the maintainer team is going to be active and get re-engaged here, Christian, there's still certainly opportunities for folks to get more involved. I'm always happy to support more folks getting involved. So we could definitely talk more about it either way this goes.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna have to
Sweet.
run, so I'll leave the meeting, but thank you everyone and keep it up.
Yeah, right on. Always good to see you, Christian.
Thank you. Ciao.
Cool. Okay, so I think that's everything then for the main agenda here. John, do you want to kind of start talking through some of the stuff that you've brought up here, my friend?
Yeah, I'll start with the last one. So the concerns that Nick had with the crossplane diff command being added into the crank CLI largely stemmed from uh, inability to guarantee that like me or my team or whoever is going to be able to like maintain the diff tool. But that raised a larger issue for him, which is that we have a lot of kind of disparate technology in the CLI, and it's kind of a second-class citizen sometimes. So his thought was that we should take the approach of I think he said that Cube Control does this, where when you want to add a plugin for Cube Control, all you need to do is put a binary on the path that's like Cube Control dash and then whatever your plugin name is, and it'll scan the path. If you execute Cube Control my plugin name, um, Cube Control will go and scan for that plugin and then execute that plugin. And he thought that provided a good framework for the way the way forward for folks to add extensions on the command line. And he kind of wanted to kind of push push the responsibility outwards to the community via like contrib repos, so you can just build your own binary for a crossplane CLI extension, and then just use it, right? And those all of those plugin repositories can have their own life cycles, right? Their own governance as a part of the Crossplane contrib project. So I wanted to surface that here because currently I have not volunteered to work on it, but I might. Unless there's somebody else that that has the itch to go and poke at it. I might not have the resources to do it for a little while yet. But if you have something inside of the Crossplane command line that's like maybe in beta, or you maybe not even in beta yet, this is something for you to consider. Having a contrib repo to house your like sub command for the CLI.
Yeah, I like this idea a lot too, John. So thanks for bringing it up and pushing on it, because it definitely opens the possibility for sort of a nice incubation sort of thing too, where hey, we can start with something in an external location, and that if it ends up being a really good fit for core, then you can move it into core if it needs to be. Otherwise, it can live a happy life outside as well too. But I really like that life cycle path being a possibility, which is really nice. And then I also, this is like kubectl plugins. That's like where they started was, if it's in like the same directory as a kubectl binary, then it can, look in that directory, it can find it and then run it, execute it, etc. And then it got more complicated than that with like the crew plugin manager and whatnot. So I don't know the current state of it today of like, if that's the only thing that's supported, or like the original simple just drop a binary thing is still supported there. I actually don't know that because it did get more complicated with like a whole package manager. But I think this is a good place to start. Like this sort of, we definitely don't need a whole freaking package manager for, Crossplane's CLI extensions and stuff like that. Like a simple approach here definitely makes sense to me.
Crew just installs the binary. It doesn't do anything.
Is that all it does? It doesn't do any like package management
dependencies. It helps you
stuff.
install a particular binary, but the mechanism that it gets into kubectl is the same. Kubectl dash the package name.
Awesome. So that original simple path there, just like it's like automation to streamline it for people.
Yeah, and in fact, crew becomes a kubectl crew plugin, just the same way every other plugin works.
kubectl dash crew.
Yep.
Ah, that's nice. Very nice. Very cool. Very cool. And then I also too, John, I like that I think this will also kind of push some interesting like have some interesting conversations where around this item here, where, okay, if there's a binary that needs some of these types that are in internal, and okay, maybe these finally should be part of the API that we maintain, and actually, you know, promote them to an area where folks can import them and use them in external repos.
Yeah, I have. So, I mean, the diff project uses, I grabbed a bunch of stuff from, I think, Trace and uh, maybe Validate. I think so. It was around like resource loading, right? There's some core tech that exists in the Crossplane CLI around like, okay, somebody passed me this YAML file, right? The name of this YAML file on the command line, or somebody passed a dash that means that we should read the YAML file from standard in. Like that sort of technology for like, okay, I'm gonna pull a thing from the file system somewhere, or I'm gonna pull a thing from standard in, or I'm gonna pull a thing. There's a couple of other ways I think that it can work. Like that stuff is shared everywhere. And it was
Amongst
located.
like the commands, like the command implementations.
Yeah. So either the code is shared or the code is not shared, but the functionality is shared, and that's worse. Um, so we have a bunch of different copies of resource loading in just slightly different configurations, and I noticed that while I was building diff because I was digging into all these packages, right? So that is something that I think needs to be surfaced, surfaced and published out in a way where all the things that consume it can consume it from a single place. But it was not. I think it was buried in internal under trace or something like that.
Yeah, I think
Anyway,
you're totally right.
I messed with it in the mega PR for Crossplane diff, so I'm gonna have to go and split that PR, I think, into some stuff that does need to get committed into core, like that change. Although I did change it to use just the Crossplane. It uses the internal package in Crossplane beta now. I think I promoted it up to that, so it would have to be not in there somewhere. It'd have to be somewhere public.
Yep. Yep, it's a similar theme, but perhaps slightly different implications of the internal stuff that's internal to the CLI, and then the internal stuff that's internal to like the core runtime crossplane reconcilers and stuff like that. Similar implications, and similar theme, but you know, perhaps slightly different as well. I don't think about it a little bit more, but just like my gut instinct is, yeah, the CLI stuff seems to be. It seems to be, I would be more freely putting that to be available for usage for people, than, you know, some of the core internal stuff that maybe shouldn't ever be an API. But you know, obviously we need to look at it on a case by case basis. But basically what you're saying, John, is that is probably something I agree with. A long-winded way to say I agree with you, I think.
Yeah, so we've got um yeah, I think there's like another contract change that's in render, that I'll need to push as well. So I'll probably want some eyes on that PR once I can manage to get those things split out, but that's neither here nor there.
Cool.
So if we are going to split stuff out like that, it's probably worth thinking about what kind of guidance we're going to get for people when they want to split their stuff out. Like, ostensibly, you don't even have to use Go, right? To put a plugin out if it's just an executable.
Binary. Yeah.
You can build the executable. It's just a binary. We might want to tell people not to do that, because of the fact that all the shared libraries, right, are going to be published out of Crank, and there's some sort of shared maintenance burden there, right? Update it once and update it everywhere is kind of a nice thing, especially when you're trying to like decentralize a lot of the stuff. Distribute the responsibility anyway. So yeah, if there's any guidance that you know, the kind of maintainers want to provide to people, we should think about what that might be before we get too deep down the decentralizing path.
Yep. Agreed.
And the last thing is a very niche technical issue, which is there's an issue in Argo, where Argo gets real mad if the conversion webhook for any CRD is unavailable for any length of time. Everything becomes unknown. which is not a great state to operate in.
But
and
even resources that have nothing to do with that particular type that
Right.
doesn't have a convert. Oh,
correct.
oh, fun.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's a bug in Argo. I think I don't know exactly how it like I don't know how Argo gets broken in that way, right? I'm not intimately familiar with its internals. But um I am wondering if there is something we can do with internally to Crossplane. Like if you have a like a provider, right, that's doing conversion webhooks on its own resources. If there's a way that we can add something around, like we were just earlier this meeting we were talking about having multiple versions of functions available, and it seems like maybe the ability to at least like run multiple replicas of a provider or something could help the case, could help this case, where if you're trying to serve the webhook and your provider pod goes down because you're rolling an update or something like that, you could prevent the webhook from going down by having multiple copies potentially. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done from a resiliency like HA perspective in Crossplane.
And John, is a little bit more context on this issue here. Is this something that's recoverable? Like, is it transient and recoverable on the Argo side, or is it like, hey, one time a webhook went down for a little bit of time, and then Argo was potato, as somebody said down here, is potato until you manually fix it in Argo. Do you know?
I am not certain. I know that
Hmm.
we managed to recover our way out of it, but I'm not sure the extent of the manual intervention that was required because that was not my on-call shift.
Lucky you.
But yeah, it happened and it was uh, confusing and painful for folks. But the impression that people got was that Crossplane broke Argo.
Mm.
Because it was a crossplane. We were just trying to look up something under Upbound, right, for the conversion webhook, and that's what got mad. Um,
And do you also know any details about like what caused the conversion webhook to be down? You said like rolling a provider pod would potentially cause
yeah,
that because
so
it's not available then.
there's uh, a couple of things that I could think of that it was. I don't have the specific context for the time that that happened, but I think if I recall correctly, we had generated a provider um, with Upjet
Mm-hmm.
for the Sumo Logic API. And I think that that provider was crash looping because it didn't have credentials. Um, and
Ah,
so it was not able to serve its own ZRDs. Um, and therefore being in a crash looping state caused this to happen. And I imagine that Argo recovered once the provider recovered or was deleted or whatever, right? But um, if there's anything we can do as far as the continuing to, I don't know, thinking about the fact that like if the provider was just hosed, it would be great if Argo had scoped the problem down to like the specific CRDs that are failing.
mm-hmm.
Um, but this is an error case that Crossplane participates in unwittingly.
Yeah. It's nice that we made it to the Argo issue here. That's nice. So yeah, so I do have a couple thoughts, and Scott, maybe you might have a couple things to either correct me on or improve on. But like my first instinct here is though, like to kind of confirm what something you said too, John, is that yeah, this I definitely would love to see this more resilient and fixed better in Argo, for sure. Like I would, if one pod is having an issue, I don't want to see all, like Argo shouldn't be going potato for everybody. That's definitely something that I would like to see fixed on their side. And then like in terms of cross-plane providers and their webhooks being more resilient, what like I don't like, my instinct there is that something with leader election, like I have a feeling that necessarily wouldn't solve the problem well, because leader election, like it has like a timeout period where like somebody has to claim the lease to become the new leader, and like during that time there's going to be some number of seconds, I don't know, where it's no matter what, like with the default, the implementation of leader election as I understand it, would still provide result in not as high availability as you really want to have like completely available the entire time. So even if you did kind of went through something like that and tried to make that robust there, I don't know how far that would go. So it might be something that would take more effort to fix and make robust and stuff, then we would want to suspend, especially if you know, Argo doesn't do anything about making this a better experience overall. Scott, did I say anything crazy or anything you want to add to that, dude?
I think the only thing I would add is, you know, we on the package manager could scan the cluster for any webhooks that are installed that don't exist anymore to kind of garbage collect those.
Oh, is that like a, from the perspective of like, hey, this webhook doesn't need to be used at all anymore? Like, and should like,
It's a pretty common pattern between upgrading between two things, and the next thing doesn't delete its webhook registration. That might be what happened here.
Yes, I mean, since the package
Interesting.
manager is responsible for both installing the CRDs and spawning the provider container, provider pod, does seem like the right surface area.
Yeah, it either left an old one that doesn't exist anymore, or it didn't update an old one to the new pod or the new service.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at this from the perspective of like, hey, a pod is on a stable provider is on a stable version, and it's, you know, just not available to serve its webhook endpoints. But I didn't think of the scenario, Scott, you're kind of describing there, where it's going through an upgrade, and you know, it has to go through a transition period from, you know, one endpoint to another endpoint coming up, and you know, cleaning up that and making it a smooth transition. I didn't think about that. Interesting.
Yeah, that's probably what happened, but that's just from listening.
Instincts. Yeah. So John, if you feel free to open an issue that kind of describes that scenario here. You know, I think maybe that is the place where something could be done better on the Crossplane side. But yeah, I think there's not a clear, you know, bulletproof, like, like low enough effort sort of thing that Crossplane could do to kind of cover up this or make it better on the Argo side, that I can think of investing in besides that.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, and the rest is an Argo issue, right? Argo shouldn't potato
Yep.
itself.
I think I might start using potato from now on. I think that's fantastic. Cool. Cool. Anything else then, John, that you wanted to cover today?
I don't think so. That's all that I got.
Right. Well, that's all that's on the agenda, Doc. Then, any last minute things that folks wanted to add before we adjourn for the week? All right. Well, cool. Great to see everybody. Thanks for joining. And then we will catch you all next month, and be prepared for a cool demo from Daniel.
Excited.
See you, everybody.